Seldom do we bring another into our fold. There are few who know these vows. Fewer still have witnessed them. Our blood flows from ancient spheres. We shall remain. They shall perish. Your sacrifice serves a greater purpose than yourself. The pain you feel will not long linger. Are you ready?
History, societies have searched for scapegoats in times of fear, hardship, and crisis. In medieval and early modern Europe, this desperation gave birth to one of the darkest phenomena in history, the witch hunt. Armed with little more than superstition and zeal, men, often driven by power, greed, or religious fervor, set out to find and exterminate those who they deemed to be agents of evil. Accusations of curses, demonic pacts, and strange ailments, these hunts led to trials and executions that spread terror across entire communities. But who were these self-appointed judges and hunters, these zealots of faith, who pursued supposed witches with a vengeance? They were both ordinary and infamous, shaping a legacy of fear that remains chilling to this day. From a humble English lawyer who declared himself the Witchfinder General, to an archbishop with political motives, these individuals wielded power over life and death with stunning brutality. This video will delve into the twisted lives and motives of history's most infamous witch hunters. What were they hoping to achieve? What beliefs and fears drove them? And why did so many communities willingly participate in these brutal, sometimes fantastical accusations? Join me as I journey back in time to uncover the truth behind the individuals who fueled on one of history's darkest chapters. Witchcraft has long haunted the human imagination. It has an ancient fear, one that has evolved alongside us through the centuries. But how did these fears escalate from whispers of superstition to large-scale, state-sanctioned hunts that left tens of thousands dead? To understand the era of the witch hunters, we first need to understand the beliefs, fears, and historical conditions that gave rise to this deadly phenomenon. The concept of witchcraft has ancient roots, deeply intertwined with the folk beliefs of Europe. For millennia, many rural communities held that some individuals possessed supernatural powers, often drawing on these beliefs to explain things that they couldn't otherwise understand, like why did their crops fail? Why did a disease ravage their livestock? And why did some families suffer such misfortune while others thrived? But it was in the Middle Ages, with the spread of Christianity across Europe, that these beliefs began to take on a more sinister form. Witchcraft, once seen as a part of a local folklore, came to be viewed as an assault on Christianity itself. The church promoted the idea that witches were servants of Satan, bent on disrupting the divine order. These fears simmered for centuries, largely confined to rumor and accusation, until one event sent them boiling over. In 1487, two German inquisitors, Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Springer, published Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. This handbook detailed what they claimed to be irrefutable evidence to witchcraft and its dangers to Christian society, and it instructed how to identify, interrogate, and punish witches. The book was a sensational hit across Europe, spreading fear far and wide, and it set the tone for the brutal hunts that would follow. Armed with the Malleus Maleficarum, officials began to codify the methods that they would use to identify and punish witches. From here, the concept of the witch hunter was born. These individuals claimed to be defenders of the faith, rooting out Satan's servants whenever they found them. But in truth, many were opportunists, eager to exploit fear for personal gain or power. As fear spread and suspicions grew, witch hunters gained influence in society. They were often men of religion or authority, though not exclusively so. In a few short years, witch hunters went from being localized figures, barely heeded by the general populace, to widely respected or feared authorities. Towns and cities welcomed them, trusting that their work could cleanse communities of any unseen evil. But as witch hunters emerged, they brought with them brutal methods that darkened the era with blood and terror. Their presence marked the start of a fevered age where anyone, neighbor, family, or friend, could be accused and condemned. What were the forces that drove them to such extremes, and what did they believe that they were protecting? And how did their ruthless practices turn entire communities into battlegrounds of suspicion and fear? In the darkened alleyways and quiet villages of the 17th century England, rumors spread like wildfire. People whispered of women with strange powers, of livestock deaths, and children's illnesses, anything unexplained that was often seen as the work of the witches. In this climate of paranoia, one man emerged to claim that he could cleanse England of this demonic threat. His name? Matthew Hopkins, and he would become known as the Witchfinder General. Though little is known about his early life, Matthew Hopkins rose to infamy during the English Civil War. The country was already tense, its people divided by political and religious upheaval, and these strains only magnified fears of witchcraft. Hopkins seized the moment and declared himself Witchfinder General, a title that he himself invented, granting himself both authority and immunity in his crusade. With a talent for instilling fear, Hopkins traveled from village to village, offering his services for a hefty fee. He promised that no witch could escape his detection, and he developed a fearsome reputation. Alongside his associate John Stern, he devised methods that he claimed would infallibly reveal witches hiding among the ordinary population. Hopkins' methods were as brutal as they were unscientific. Chief among them was sleep deprivation, which involved keeping the accused awake for days on end. Exhausted and mentally frayed, many of the accused would eventually confess just to put an end to the torment. This was the beginning of the confession cycle, a terrifying pattern in which individuals confessed to impossible acts just to find relief. Another favored technique was the infamous swimming test. Hopkins would bind the accused by the hands and feet and lower them into the body of water. According to his theory, if they floated, it was because the water rejected them as unholy beings. If they sank, they were declared innocent, but they often drowned in the process. This cruel irony was lost on Hopkins, who saw each test as proof of his unerring methods. Hopkins' tactics spread terror in rural communities across eastern England. Local authorities, already swept up in fear, readily accepted his judgments. During his infamous Essex witch hunts, Hopkins convicted as many as 200 people, an astonishing number by England's standards. One of the most notorious cases involved an elderly disabled widow named Elizabeth Clark. With no family and few allies, she was an easy target. Accused of making pacts with the devil, she was subjected to Hopkins' brutal techniques until she eventually confessed. Her confession implicated others in the town, leading to a chain of accusations that saw more innocent people arrested, tortured, and executed. Clark's case was one of the many that Hopkins used to inspire a frenzy of accusations. Families turned on one another, neighbors were swept up in suspicion, and communities became so fearful of witches that the mere suggestion of witchcraft could ruin lives. In towns like Manningtree, where Hopkins held significant sway, mass hysteria took over, and anyone with a quarrel could easily accuse their enemies of witchcraft. As quickly as he rose, Hopkins' influence began to wane. His extreme methods drew criticism from religious leaders, who saw his actions as inhumane, even by the standards of the day. In 1647, the clergy publicly denounced his practices, calling them barbaric and accusing him of profiting from people's fears. There are even accounts that Hopkins himself faced accusations of witchcraft and was forced to undergo his own swim test, though this remains largely unverified. Whether his end came from public condemnation or simply just fading influence, by 1647, Hopkins vanished from public life. Within a year, he was dead, though the exact cause remains unknown. Some say that he succumbed to tuberculosis. Others claim it was the psychological weight of his actions. But whatever the reason, Hopkins left behind a legacy of terror that would haunt England long after his death. The damage Hopkins inflicted on communities was profound. His witch hunts had turned friends into enemies, neighbors into accusers, leaving scars that would last for generations. The so-called Witchfinder General had exposed a dark truth. The power of fear could be wielded as brutally as any weapon. Matthew Hopkins may have been a man of his time, yet he is remembered as a harbinger of the witch-hunting frenzy that would soon sweep across Europe. His methods, though brutal, laid the groundwork for future witch hunters who would follow in his footsteps with even greater ferocity. So I'm going to end it here, and then this is part 1. I have about 5 other witch hunters that I may cover in the series if you guys like it. So just let me know. All right, thanks guys for watching. Tales Told in the Dark. See you next time.